Hey everybody, good morning. This is the week of November 22nd. Getting this newsletter out a day late, unfortunately, sorry. There's a lot going on in my life. Last week I didn't really have any updates from the podcasting standpoint, so I'm going to play a little bit of catch up here. Things I would have probably included last week. First off, I was on Kyle Kingsbury's podcast, which I'll have all of these links linked below, just below this video here. And that was a great conversation. It was less about birth, more about the sort of changing story in our cultural narrative, and gets a little into the deep state stuff, the COVID stuff, etc. It's really kind of me speaking right off the cuff from the heart, as opposed to filtering everything through the lens of being a physician. So you'll enjoy that one. I was also on the Highly Optimized podcast. We talked a little bit about psychedelics and cannabis use. We're going to be doing another interview specifically about some of those things in pregnancy. But that's hosted by my friend Ryan Sprague. I think you'll really enjoy that one. Then on my own podcast, episode 14 came out. That was 3 things that you want the world to know about caring for women. That was with Lisa Marie Sanchez Oxenham. She's a nomadic water birth keeper out in California. She's also in my collaborator program. Hi, Lisa Marie. That's a great episode. And then episode 15 was with Jason and Melissa Saunders. I met them at the Runga retreat in Austin a couple months ago. They are the owners of Hyperbaric Oxygen Therapy USA. They're also chiropractors, and they sit on all kinds of boards all over the country for various things. They both became quick friends of mine when I met them at Runga. And I think that there's tons of implications for how we could use hyperbaric oxygen therapy for women, specifically in the postpartum period, issues with fertility, issues with PCOS and other inflammatory conditions like endometriosis. So just, traditionally HBOT has been used for, to improve performance in elite athletes, along with helping to facilitate healing from trauma or severe infections like necrotizing fasciitis. But now it's becoming more of a commercial product because we realize it has so much of an impact on our endocrine system and how some of the underlying cellular machinery works. And by hypersaturating the body with oxygen, you actually see some good results for everything from neurological issues to inflammatory issues to, recovery from traumatic things, including birth. So that's a great episode. Maren Green and I, we released a new episode 16 on the one about the midwife and the OB, our own podcast. This one's on self-care, which is interesting because in the episode, we talk about what types of things do we do to care for one another or care for ourselves. And, over the past 2 weeks, our baby's now 2 weeks old, Everly Rosa. And if you don't know the story, check out last week's newsletter. I tell the whole birth story, 2 hours of labor, did breath work, effigy breath work. It was fantastic. And the baby came out asleep without any head deformation. And the baby was a pound bigger than our first, Penelope Luce, which is interesting. So 7 pounds, nearly 7.5 pounds. So anyways, pretty interesting stuff there. But anyways, in caring for the newborn, caring for my wife, caring for our toddler, monetizing my podcast, getting all the normal business stuff, publishing, essays and podcasts and everything else, I wasn't sleeping. I'm also preparing for the oral OBGYN boards. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I came down with shingles right around here. It's like the T10-ish, T10, T8, somewhere in there, dermatome. And shingles is nasty, but took some Valacyclovir and it had cleared up in a couple days. And it's actually doing much better now. So that's definitely a relevant episode right now. I'm also reading a book by Erin McMorrow. She's a PhD. It's called Grounded. It's fantastic. I don't think I have it right here, but I have that linked as well. There's a lecture by Zach Bush back from 2016. That's 5 years ago. Zach Bush is a pretty prolific thinker in the holistic healthcare space and how we interact with our environment. And he talks about how glyphosates have basically inhibited our body's ability to deal with free radicals. And in the lecture, it's about an hour long. He just kind of slices right through it, and it's fantastic. If you don't know about Zach Bush, this is a great way to be introduced. My podcast has a new website. It's holisticobgynpod.com. That's where you'll find all the show notes. It's a 501c3, so if you did want to support the show, you can make a tax-deductible donation. I'm going to be setting up a Patreon account, which will include at the lowest level of sponsorship, $25 a month. You'll have access to the routinely updated clinical summaries folder that I have on Google. If you subscribe and support the show through Patreon, you'll get access to all of them. There's like 100 documents in there. Basically, they're consolidated notes of just the exact things you need to know, including tables and diagrams that are important, including studies. I've linked studies that help support one way of thought versus another. It's a really, really valuable resource that I think you'll enjoy. And of course, ACOG updates their guidelines every month or so. And so, if they update these two practice bulletins, I will have updated them for you, and they'll be updated in the folder. So as long as you're a subscriber, you'll have access to that. Anybody in my collaborator program, silver or gold level, will have access to that as well. So if you haven't checked out the collaborator program, please consider doing that. It's still got a couple spots left, although I am certainly overworked at the present moment. But I just had a call with one of my collaborators today about profound anemia that just appeared out of nowhere and some black tarry stools. So we talked about getting her to the hospital to have a GI bleed workup because she's losing blood cells fast. We got to stop that. So it's just one example of how I can assist with clinical decision making. And then lastly, there was this article published in Nature. Adults who microdose psychedelics report health-related motivations and lower levels of anxiety and depression compared to non-microdosers. It's a Rootman et al. Study. Paul Stamets is also one of the authors on that study. And, I'm a huge proponent for plant medicines and mushrooms, etc., for some of these more unusual purposes in medicine, right, where we otherwise don't really have an answer, like refractory depression. So check all of that stuff out. My office hours are going to be listed there. It's going to be this Tuesday from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. If you send me an email during that time frame, consider it cost-free advice from a holistic OBGYN. That's my way of equilibrating the disparities in what people can afford to pay for, right, in the world of medicine. I don't work with insurance companies, so people who have insurance and who are reliant on their insurance premiums to pay for their healthcare oftentimes can't access me. But this is a really good way, 6 hours every week that I offer, free of my free time of mine, in order to give everybody access that wants to get some advice from me. So that's all for this week. That was a lot. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.